4:03, and I call the City Council, Pico Rivera, City of Pico Rivera Council meeting to order. Please roll call.
Councilmember Camacho.
Here.
Councilmember Laura.
Here.
Councilmember Lutz.
Here.
Mayor Elias.
Here. Councilmember Lutz, can you please perform the invocation?
Yes. Bow your heads. Lord, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance, Lord. Amen.
Councilman Laura, can you do the pledge of allegiance, please?
Everyone, please turn to face the flag. Place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Mayor, City Council, pulling item number 10 for further discussion with staff.
We're pulling item number 10?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. City Manager, we have a study session. Could you please name and give us the topic?
Yes, Mayor, City Council. Tonight's study session is to begin our initial discussions regarding the American Rescue Plan. I have Angelina Garcia, our Assistant City Manager, also still overseeing finance, to give the presentation.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Thank you for allowing us to share with you our list of proposed projects for the American Rescue Plan Act this afternoon. The agenda today will cover the background of the ARPA guidelines and parameters, the permissible uses, staff's guidelines and list of proposed projects, and we're going to dedicate the last part of the presentation for council to provide direction and input on how these funds should be spent. So this is something that we covered at the August meeting, where council gave us direction to report out the revenue losses. So once again, on March 11th, this ARPA legislation was signed into as an act. The city's allocation was $14.7 million. We received half of that as of June 2021. On May 11th, the Department of Treasury issued an interim final rule stating how these funds should be used. And on June 27th, they also issued reporting parameters for us to report. Now, this timeline for allocation is a fluid timeline, fluid deadlines internally imposed mostly, that provides us a direct path towards allocating and being able to actively use these funds and report on these funds. So this is the first study session being held on September 28th. And what all of staff has done is prepared a list of priority projects that each department views meets the criteria set forward in future slides. We're going to hold a second study session with a little bit more guidance and clarity as to what City Council would like to do with the funds within the parameters of what the ARPA Act allows us to do. And we're going to ask City Council to actually rate the projects if City Council is ready to do so. Then we have a little bit of time between October 12th and November 9th to further refine the list, and hopefully at that point, City Council will approve and appropriate funds. If not, we still have a little bit of time. We still have another meeting in December before we report to the U.S. Department of Treasury what we will ultimately do with those funds. Now, the U.S. Department of Treasury will still allow us to reappropriate and redesignate those funds even after December 31st. Now, again, just to go over the permissible uses, the items to the left of the presentation are the 4 major categories that are listed by the Department of Treasury as permissible uses. So the 2 top ones bolded are the ones that city staff are recommending to apply these funds towards. So the first is for the provision of government services to the extent of a reduction in revenue due to COVID-19. So again, the city calculated about $10.2 million that fit into this category. Then we can then apply it to any of the categories listed on the right side of this slide. Some of the other categories are necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband, response to public health emergency or negative economic impacts, or response to workers performing essential work during COVID-19. On this next slide, we have the restricted uses. So Department of Treasury has told us that these 4 categories should not be used, should not be paid for by ARPA funds. So it's a deposit into pension funds, to pay debt service, to replenish reserves, or for any utility revenue losses experienced by the agencies. Now we're going to go into staff's guidelines and a list of potential projects for council consideration. So the criteria that the city staff used are listed as following in 5. We tried to keep the criteria very simple, and that is, by and large, the main objective is that the project supports at least one of the city council priorities, as that is how city staff plans all of the efforts that go into any financial plans developed. Also, the project recommended cost is shovel-ready, and that is primarily to meet the December 31st, 2026 deadline imposed by the Department of Treasury. Now, because the funding source is federal and because the Department of Treasury is still refining their guidelines, we wanted to ensure that the project or program can meet the procurement criteria set forth by the federal guidelines. So they have their own procurement practices, their own set of procurement guidelines that sometimes are more restrictive than agencies or best practices. And lastly, does not add ongoing expenditures to the general fund. So because these are one-time monies, they should be used for one-time needs. And here, once again, for the city council, these are the city council approved priorities, but just for the benefit of the public and the community, we thought we'd list them out again. Fiscal sustainability, organizational stability, economic development, infrastructure, land use, and public safety. Now, just coincidentally, the last week on September 20th, the ICMA, the International City Managers Association, released the results of a survey of over 500 agencies and their priorities for using ARPA funds. By and large, infrastructure was the top investment priority for communities of all sizes. And what's driving this prioritization is that capital improvement plans have been sitting on the shelf, and have been highly influential in setting priorities for this fiscal recovery fund spending because of other fiscal constraints. These projects have not been funded in prior years. Additionally, over half of the direct recipients are utilizing strategic plans developed prior to the passage of the rescue plan legislation to fund. So they're taking full advantage of just all of the deferred maintenance and capital projects that have been sitting there unattended to. I can't see, okay. So then going on to the ICMA survey, within the infrastructure category, most anticipated projects and priorities concern water and sewer infrastructure. And so you can see over 74% of the respondents use their ARP funds to fund major infrastructure projects within this category. Overall, half of the survey respondents also anticipated replacing lost public sector revenue according to the Treasury's guidelines. So the 2 top uses proposed by all of these 500 agencies are investment in infrastructure or allocating it to revenue loss. Now, using, all of the parameters and even, supported by the ICMA's survey, we also took the same approach that ICMA took long before they came out with their survey. This is a little bit of a busy slide, but it dissects the uses for the 14.7 million. To the left, you have the allocation towards general revenue loss of $10.2 million. Then we show what our recommended use of that is. So we're intending to use the 10.2 to allocate towards police or public safety. So our contract with the sheriff any given year is between $11 and $12 million. So that's fully absorbed within that contract. So then that allows us to repurpose those funds, since that in and of itself meets the federal requirements, and redesignate them to some of the general recommendations listed at the bottom part in gray. So based on, again, staff's recommendation and prioritizations, we've encompassed them in 4 basic categories: park facilities, medium beautification, street rehab projects, and other community services that we'll go into a little bit deeper in future slides. Now, to the right is what's left over after we apply the 10.2. So the 4.5 can be spent on any of the items listed on the right-hand side and previously discussed. We are recommending that the 4.5 be allocated to water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure, specifically towards the PFAS treatment system project. So as you know, that runs estimated around $11 to $14 million. And even though we have secured some partial funding, grant funding to cover that PFAS project, the rest of it has to come from the Water Authority. Now, by allocating this $4.5 million, we can then repurpose the same $4.5 million that is no longer used by the Water Authority and repay the general fund part of the $18 million debt that the Water Authority owes to the general fund. What that does is free up that existing $4.5 million to allocate it to other unpaid, unfunded infrastructure. Now, what we used to better assess the total value needed for infrastructure projects are all of the master plans. So the Public Works Department has dedicated its last few years to investing in infrastructure master plans, which identify the condition of our infrastructure and help city prioritize future projects and funding needs. The following studies have been finalized and used in developing the city's 5-year CIP, but are largely unfunded. So the Water Master Plan we use not only to provide or to complete the 5-year CIP, but also to create the water rate plan and to propose water rate increases. We also have the wastewater or sewer master plan, stormwater pavement management plan, which the Public Works Director just presented to you last meeting, the sidewalk priority list, and the ADA transition plan, as well as a facilities master plan that right now is in process. Now, here is a summary of all of the unfunded needs identified by staff. Now, obviously, the $76.2 million is not all-inclusive. These are just like the highest priority projects that have been identified by staff. And also, they're much larger than the 14 million allocated through the ARP funds. So we know that we can't fund all of them, but this is an opportunity for us to look at each of the priority projects and start the conversation as to how much is going to be applied to some, all, or each of the projects. And so this is a very busy list. Actually, for parks and facilities, we actually divided it into 2 slides totaling some $24 million. If you look at the 2 slides combined between the Aquatic Center renovation and the Rio Hondo Park renovation, that takes up closely about $18 to $19 million of the close to $24 million. So absent that, we have $5 million in parks and facility improvements that are needed in the short term. Now, obviously, after we get the facilities assessment, condition assessment, and the annual capital outlay requirement, we'll have a better assessment of what all the citywide needs are. But these are the improvements that have been needed for the last 3 or 4 years that have been deferred due to budgetary constraints of the city. That's a total list for parks and facilities, 23.9 million. And here's just some visuals of each of those facility improvements. So we've talked about the Parks and Rec Director, Ugar, has talked to City Council previously about the aquatic center and the large need for a rehab to be able to reopen this pool. We have HVAC installation at Pio Pico and Rivera Park gyms, new roofs at 2 parks, kitchen renovations in 2 parks, and a total of 15 scoreboards needed to be replaced. Now going on to the median beautification. In October of 2018, the City Council was presented with a citywide roadway median landscape master plan, which identified major city street arterials and design concepts, including water conservation, reduction in maintenance, and increased visual appeal and attractiveness of city streets. So obviously that plays into 2 major City Council priorities: infrastructure and community economic development. While staff continues to seek grant funds for these projects, securing funding from the ARPA funds would allow us to better align these improvements with the annual pavement improvement projects. So as we're working on the PCI and rehabbing the streets, if we align a certain street segment with these median rehab projects, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And so here are pictures from the 2018 plan and report for each of the 5 medians that are identified: Washington, Paramount, Rosemead, San Gabriel, and Slauson. The last one is the street infrastructure. So that is to enable us to better, to improve the PCI, the Pavement Condition Index of the city. And while there's a $37 million need in the short term, and we only have 14 million, we wanted to just present the total estimated need for all of the city streets identified in the pavement management plan. And here's just a visual of what the report stated in terms of the condition, the average condition of city streets. So as you can see, over 35% of the streets had a PCI of between 30 and 60. The average PCI, or the desired PCI, is about 65. And so now we move on to community services needs. So city staff, just looked at all of the needs outside of the deferred infrastructure, and looked at all of the just ongoing conversations that have been had over the Business Economic Relief Grant. Now, despite the fact that that CDBG does have programs where we grant economic relief grants to community businesses, this would also give another form of relief and allows the city to create its own criteria to issue grants to city businesses. So the city has internally created a list of guidelines for the businesses to follow in order to seek these grants. And so eligible businesses could receive relief with the retention of an active city business license. So they have to be active in the city, have a proof of final certificate of occupancy, no outstanding code violations, and must demonstrate financial hardship, and also have had existed in the city as a business on or before 2019. Now, the security system at city facilities, an urgent need due to a recent vandalism and criminal activity has been noted in local parks and city facilities. So these would essentially provide security cameras at all city facilities. And we've been discussing an automatic license plate reader program with the LA County Sheriffs and have developed a budget for what the financial need would be if we installed 4 cameras at 10 different intersections throughout the city. So that would be at a price tag of about $320,000. And here we slid in the 5-year forecast as a reminder that, these unfunded projects, infrastructure projects, and facilities and parks projects have not been ignored. But the issue is that as we build the annual capital and operating budget, there are no discretionary funds left to cover these large capital projects. So absent any other funding need, we'd have to go out for debt, or we'd have to go out for grants. This is one of the most competitive cities and aggressive cities when it comes to competing for grants and securing grants, but we still have a large hole to fill in terms of funding needs for capital infrastructure. So this is a time where we'll ask City Council for input on these items in the presentation, and also look to see what you'd like to see at the October 12th meeting as we continue to discuss and prioritize and maybe even rate these capital projects and other recommendations.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I know this is a one-time opportunity. I've never seen this types of, obviously, allocation of funds to us, but then again, we haven't seen a pandemic either. And nonetheless, I think this is an opportunity for us to really prioritize what we are trying to accomplish, because there's, as we can see, there's many items to be funded. I think they're all priorities in one way or another, but trying to get the best bang for our buck is going to be the key in prioritizing these. So I thank you for compiling this. I mean, I think the conversation will continue on issues specific to what we want to prioritize. And I know trying to get the funds directly to benefit our families and businesses is going to be key for me as it relates to looking at the overall project. So again, thank you for putting this together, staff, and everything.
Thank you.
Councilman Lara?
Great, thank you. Thank you for the time and effort you've put into this. It was a well-rounded presentation and very specific yet at the same time. Thank you for that. Assistant City Manager.
Thank you.
In regards to the median beautification, these numbers come off the report that was issued a few years ago, correct?
Yes, sir.
I've read that report also and I've looked at it. I wish we could go back and look at that again, because I suspect that the numbers would actually be a lot less, in the sense that I would like to see a more simplistic revitalization of our medians. There was the design that was put forth on various streets, and I, for the majority of our medians, would just like to see grass, to be honest with you. I'm concerned that when we get too cute and we have a great deal of variety of plants, that the maintenance and upkeep falls to the wayside. And I'd point to Beverly Boulevard, and I'd point to Paramount and Mines. They were great projects when they started, but we just have a hard time doing the upkeep on them. So I think that a lot of these numbers would be a lot less, especially when we've engaged Central Basin. They said that they'd run the water lines for us. In fact, I talked to some of the members about a week ago, and they're sitting on a pile of cash, and they want to give it away to shovel-ready projects, and that's recycled water pipeline. The general manager told us that they would eat the cost of running that pipeline as long as we agreed to buying water from them. So when I look at that and when I think about the medians, I think that that actual price tag is probably much lower if we can have another agency pick up the cost of actually running the pipe. So I'd like to look at that in terms of medians. That's something very important to me. I'm more interested in projects that are going to be here 20, 30 years down the road. Roofing, redoing kitchens. That stuff is going to have a longevity to it. I'm also very interested in the automatic license plate readers. I think that's a great tool for public safety. I think it gives an edge to our law enforcement so that if there's a criminal or maybe someone murdered someone and they drove through our community, we could tag them. Their license plate could be read. It's just another kind of notch in terms of keeping us safe. I'm not interested in the Business Economic Relief Grant, to be honest with you, the $500,000. I think there were multiple programs that were put forth, whether by the federal government with PPP loans or our own business grant that we did. I'd like the money, I want to see things built. The big demand is our infrastructure. The big demand, in my opinion, is our beautification of the city. And I want to move towards that. Thank you.
Councilman Lutz?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Director Garcia, for that presentation. I have a couple of suggestions that I want to go over first that I'd like to have incorporated to utilize the funding. And then I have a question about some items that have to do with water, PFAS. So I'll leave that to the end. First, I am very proud that staff looked at getting those automatic license plate readers. I think that's fantastic. Public safety, keeping our residents and businesses safe is paramount. And I'd also like to see if we can incorporate putting 2 additional sheriffs within our city limits and an additional patrol vehicle. Possibly we can do a study to see what the cost would be. I'm not sure if I can actually do, at this time, get a second on that. Or we can save that for the 6 o'clock. The other item I wanted to see on parks and facilities needs is exercise equipment incorporated, similar to the ones that are at the Pico Park. Those exercise stations that are bolted down to the cement, I'd like to see those incorporated in, say, Rivera and Smith Park to get people healthy and active out and doing their exercises in the morning. That'd give them a little more variety in addition to the walking around the walking tracks. And I'd also like to see that some of the funds allocated to Rio Hondo Park be dedicated to doing a full-size soccer field. That field, that park allows and gives the space for a full-size, and I think that would be very complementary to the 2 existing soccer mini pitch fields that are being built at Pico Park. Those are my suggestions. And the final suggestion would be for water and sewer infrastructure, I'd like to see that the automatic water meters be incorporated for our residents. I, like a lot of residents, doubt the reading every month, but if we had automatic reading, you can't doubt that. And so there's there's something of confidence level that would raise with our residents once they found out that it's an automatic meter read of their water system. So those are my suggestions. Now, going back to my question, if about 4.5 were to be dedicated for PFAS treatment, how does that relate to the 2.5 that Congresswoman Linda Sanchez is going to be, I think officially has given to the city, and the amount of donation or grant that is being awarded by WRD to Pico Rivera? I understand there's some wording there for WRD that the grant may not be a grant. In my eyes, it seems as though it's a loan. So if we get money from Congresswoman Sanchez and from other sources for PFAS, the money that's awarded by WRD then has to be paid back?
No, not necessarily, because that would be only if if the total amounts applied were over and above the total project cost. And so if we're talking about 4.5 million by WRD plus the 2.5 by the state, that's only $7 million out of the 14 million that the PFAS is estimated to cost. So
we're
we have a
safe.
$7 million,
So we're safe.
commitment.
We don't have to pay back any money.
No.
Okay, good. That was lingering in my head for about 3-4 days. Thank you for that. That's it for me. Again, thank you very much. Those were my suggestions, and I'd like to see if maybe I can have the rest of my colleagues in agreement over the next couple months.
Thank you.
Council member, we do plan to bring a full presentation on our PFAS program, where we're at, also some of the financing mechanisms that we're utilizing at our next council meeting. Like to add that I was a meter reader at one time for Edison, so I used to read a meter for 30 yards away, so I get why you feel the way you do.
And then also to add to that, we will look at where the AMI project is, but the 5-year capital improvement plan did include, I can't remember off the top of my head the total amount for an AMI project, and that is to convert our existing meters to automatic meter readers. So that is currently in the plan. I just have to go back and see what year we are funding that in.
One other item that, when you were explaining that, I just remember beautification of medians on Washington. At the end of the decade, Washington's going to have a new train coming through. So here is an estimated about $800K. I'm wondering if that could be leveled down to something very minimal, because it's all going to be torn out.
Or we can put that at the bottom of the list or the last of the funding alternatives.
Or very minimal items, just maybe maintaining the actual surface of the pavement of the road. And in combination what you said, I hate to see everything torn out, money lost.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'd like some clarification about WRD. I know our contract's not finalized with them, but how much are you hypothesizing that we're going to get from them?
Terry, would you be able to give them the exact amount? I have a lot of numbers running in my head.
Thank you. Right now, the commitment has been from WRD for 4.5 million, but at the last WRD meeting, they allocated more funding overall for attacking the PFAS issue in their entire area. We are going back with staff now to see, with the hopes that that would increase our 4.5 to something higher. We don't know and don't have any indication from them yet what that number would be, but we do believe, because of that those additional funds allocated, that it would be somewhat more than 4.5 million, although we do not expect it to be able to fund the entire project with it. So, sorry, I don't have anything more detailed, but we're continuing to monitor that.
No, I think that's about right, because Pico Water initially was expecting somewhere in the realms of 2.4, 2.5 million from WRD. And then I think they ended up with 4.2, more substantial. So I anticipate the city on being awarded slightly more money than the initial 4.5. I'm hoping in the realms of 7 million for a project. In addition to the 2, that brings us to about 910. It brings us slightly shy of. Now, when we raise water rates, Assistant City Manager Garcia, if I'm not mistaken, we raise water rates to also garner money for the PFAS program, correct?
Yes.
How much did we set aside for that?
So the full 14 million. However, I will say this. We wanted to build a plan that looked at everything that could be done in the next 5 years in terms of infrastructure. Yeah. And as you recall from the presentation, 1/3 of those projects were deemed could be done in the 5 years. And that was before the ARPA funds, right? Before we took the water rates and all that. So by us taking this 4.5 from the ARPA and dedicating it to the PFAS, we're not overfunded in water, right? We could just use that to accelerate another project on the 15-year list of capital project needs for the water.
I had an opportunity of reviewing the American Rescue Plan Act in all its glory. And, you know, I have some questions, obviously, and some concerns. You know, the use of this money is going to reflect on the way that we handle things, okay? It's going to say a lot about us in the way that we handle this money. Now, cities can use the funds to support public health expenditures, address the negative economic impacts caused by public health emergencies, replace lost public sector revenue, provide premium pay for essential workers, and invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Now, as a business person, you know, I see this, okay, as working capital for the community. And I see it as an opportunity because it doesn't have any budget, that it's discretionary funds that we can use, okay, that we can use to develop items, to develop, you know, a future, okay? We have the opportunity of using these funds to generate more revenue, to generate actually more investment into the community. So, you know, the situation that I'm, you know, concerned about is that we already have that money just not only budgeted, but about 3 or 4 times budgeted here. And I don't see that it's addressing the issue that it's supposed to be out there, okay? I only see $500,000 in relief for businesses, okay? $500,000 is nothing. As I mentioned to you, you do more for companies giving them $10,000 and $20,000 grants and loans than anything, you know, worse than that. You just help them become bankrupt in that situation. So again, I'm concerned about the emphasis that we have in terms of repairing. I understand that we have to, and it looks great, but I don't think that you know, the total of this money should be invested in repairing the situations that we have here when we need to repair some structural problems in terms of our community. Now, if we already have committed, okay, this plan here, why is there need for a community survey?
We have not committed any funds yet.
Well, in this plan, you pretty well have just you know, determined what the staff has thought what is necessary, no?
So this study session provides the city council our recommendations for the priority items that city council will decide on as a collective body.
I have, you know, I have read where cities have really taken just, you know, a tremendous concern with this and have developed, you know, committees of businesses and veterans and senior citizens and so on to be able to determine what their needs are and as a community be able to, okay, to provide the input necessary and where the allocations are. I don't hear anything about community other than $500,000 to businesses. And I think, again, you know, that we need to be able to, and we've been talking about this for a long time. In fact, we were talking about it in January that we were going to have some sessions with the public to be able to identify what the needs are in that. And we failed so far to do it, okay? So what I want to do, and there's an outreach plan that I don't know where it is, okay? I don't know where it is, but we still haven't been able to get the community involved, okay? And to determine really what their needs and wants are in this situation, okay? I've heard about cities actually leveraging the money to do capitalization in here, to start credit union, a federal credit union here, okay? Something of that nature that would be able to, you know, to generate the type of investment that we need. We're in a unique situation, okay? We have the potential of business development with the Whittier Narrows Dam. You know, one of the things that we should really be focusing in is, you know, how are we going to help our businesses be able to get as much as we possibly can? Can we afford to have a business plan office, okay, that would help, you know, the businesses through this? So again, what I'm doing is that I don't see the community situation in it, and I don't see how a community survey based on this, you know, is going to help other than just just giving them the opportunity to voice their opinions.
Yeah, Mayor, and I just wanted to just add to the fact that, I'm looking forward to the more detailed conversation based on the recommendations by staff and the discussion that is being, the proposals that are being presented here by my colleagues as well, because once again, we have a dream list of items, but then we have to come back to reality. And what is that reality is what we all feel is a priority, whether it be public safety, is definitely the number one priority, whether in economic development conversation, getting more into detail. I know we've allocated $1.5 million from the surplus to economic development to do surveys and studies that I think it's on its way, but getting more specific to that. But I think all requests up here have value. I think the question is I look at it from also the perspective of how do we get it directly to benefit the community, but also how do we turn $1 into $2 in value, right? And so from that perspective, there's a combination of things. One, I see value and investment in our business community. There's a lot of folks that did not take advantage of these federal funds, and we have to assist them in that way. I think a direct impact, and I failed to mention, a direct impact to our community would be to, directly to our families. Many youth sports in our community are coming back in a way, and everybody wants to come out there. But that cost, whether it be $50 a program or $100+ a program, that's a direct impact to families. So I think we need to consider potentially waiving future fees in our sports and programs to our residents of Pico Rivera. I think that's a direct value. But I'll reemphasize the pool repairs. That is an important item. I reemphasize and agree with the beautification aspect as far as the medians. When we did the medium improvement, it was a citywide assessment to determine what best to approach this. I would agree that there are medians already in development, Telegraph, Whittier, as was stated, Washington, it's not priority. I think we need to take that off the list altogether. But more importantly, we can choose certain medians that we can do that, emphasize and prioritize, but also minimize and simplify it. It looks beautiful, but yet doesn't have so many intricacies. And then lastly, we talked a lot about the sparse space in our city, and we're trying to mitigate the impact to our community based on the Whittier Dam Safety Improvement Projects, because I do believe there's economic opportunity, but also we don't know how we're going to do as it relates to mitigating that impact to make Pico Rivera whole again by losing 40% of our park space. So we need to carry that conversation amongst ourselves of where we're going to recreate new land, new green space, but also have that conversation with our partners in the school district and determine where do we maximize value in some of the unused fields that are out there, that even the leased spaces that they have are underutilized or not utilized at all. But whether we do it or not, those are conversations we need to have based on these spaces. So again, I look forward to a more specific dialogue based on the staff recommendations, which I think you guys did a good job in prioritized discussion, but also all the proposals that have been provided here by my colleagues as well. So,
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I have a question and a couple of comments. Question is for Director Garcia. We had the grants available, and at that point, there were still some available. Not all of them that we had budgeted were actually allocated. About how many businesses would you say are still interested, just maybe missed the deadline, or would possibly be interested in these funds again?
Well, we have about 130,000, 131 almost to be exact. I think it's $130,780 in unexpended funds, and potentially another 25,000. We've been trying to see if we can work with Ultimate. I don't think we would have any difficulty getting businesses interested in applying for those CDBG funds. We did have a few that did not, they backed out of the program just because of the amount of paperwork involved with CDBG. And we had two others that started the program, were submitting paperwork, and then they basically have not been responsive and they've fallen out. So there is about 131,000 there that we could put towards new business grants from Community Development Block Grant Funds.
So we already have funds that we could relieve some of the proposed 500,000 from the ARPA funds that
Yes.
the businesses in addition. The other comments that I have are, in the parks, another question as well, in the parks recommendations, one thing that we learned during the pandemic is, Wi-Fi is essential. And I feel like even our Spectrum Wi-Fi services are not substantial. I didn't see any recommendations relating to Wi-Fi or broadband infrastructure. I know we are kind of far off from that. That's not shovel-ready, so to speak. But would there be anything we can do in terms of providing Wi-Fi at the parks, for after-school programs or the teen center programs? I know they're not open at the moment, but I think investing in our Wi-Fi broadband infrastructure will be very, very valuable for our future. God forbid we would have another shutdown like we did in the past. But I would like to see something in that I didn't notice in our current proposals. I'd like to also remind my colleagues, this is one-time funds. It's wonderful. We're not Santa Monica, we're not Malibu, other cities that were in great financial shape coming in. And so I completely understand that we are unique to Pico Rivera, and I think we need to think with the mindset, although I support public safety, I don't think the best investment would be to pay for staff or sheriffs, because we could afford to pay for them 1 year, but then what's going to happen in the next year when we don't have these ARPA funds again? So I think it would be more value to build structures that are going to last us, as my colleague, Councilmember Lara addressed, is going to last us a decade or 2 decades, which are going to be better suited for our children in the future. When possibly we're not here anymore. So I think we have to remind ourselves of that. In addition, I think the dog park idea is great in terms of if we're going to build our fields and our infrastructure. In terms of also our medians, we have to consider the drought conditions, and that may be worsening. So I don't think we should be looking to purchase water or continuing watering our medians, but maybe how we can beautify them with art or drought-tolerant plants, things that are not going to require so much water. And so that might be something, again, a great point from my colleague here, Councilmember Lutz, is Washington Boulevard and some of our streets are going to be facing construction. So we need to look at which medians are going to be torn up, right, with our capital improvement projects. So we need to consider what's going to be torn up and invest into that as well. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Councilman Lara.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Dr. Sanchez. Those are some really good points that I agree with. Just a point about Washington Boulevard, and it's a good point that Councilmember Lutz brought out. I would suggest artificial grass in some of those medians. I don't necessarily like it. I like real grass, but artificial grass down that median. We understand that the gold line's coming, but at least it would be something, than just looking at dirt. I'd also like to set aside or talk about setting aside some money for the dual mini pitch fields there at Smith Park. They're in conjunction with our Rancho Unified School District at Ruben Salazar and aiding in restriping their basketball courts. Those basketball courts are always being used. Right now, they're packed. That project is still very much in play. The El Rancho Unified School District, the board, they set aside a specific committee to engage the city. They're eager to get that going. I think we need to make sure we set aside some funds for that, because that's something that's going to be here in 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And I guarantee you, 20, 30 years from now, those mini pitch fields, whether it's Pico Park or whether it's Ruben Salazar, will be packed. So it's a long-term investment.
Councilman? No?
In terms of your comment, Mayor, regarding the community not being involved in input, there have been at least 5 different opportunities in person that I have seen the city engaging residents. The 3 community biking outreach events, there was a big questionnaire that even children were able to participate, and they had give a slip of stickers, and they had a big board of all these ideas: dog park, this park things that they would like to see the city purchase. And even the kids got to vote on what they wanted to see in the city. So I know on July 10th, 17th, 31st, August 25th, and I believe at the National Night Out as well, which have 5 different community events from July to August, the city has been engaging the community in addition to this survey. So I think that once we get those results back, we might see a little more input. So I do want to give staff recognition for that. And I don't know that we've been doing this with the senior center or the senior events, but I'm sure there are pockets of residents that we could reach out to. But I know that we have, at least through July to August, had a lot of community survey engagement in terms of what we want to see, what they would like to see, and how we could potentially use these funds. So I'm looking forward to seeing the results of those surveys.
Councilman Lutz, any question?
So our next meeting on this topic is October 12th?
Yes. So what we'll do with all of the information that we've gathered through this discussion is provide a list of all of the additional items that the city council has brought forward today. And we've heard the things that you liked and didn't like, so we'll figure out a way to formulate a list that encompasses everything that staff proposed and folds in all of the conversation from today. And so at that time, we'd have the opportunity to better refine the list and hopefully rate them and maybe allocate not just the estimated amount, but maybe a lower amount. Like, for example, if one median is $4 million and you'd like to allocate a lesser amount for a more simplified version, then we can do that. We just might not have exact estimates at that point.
Councilman Lara.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I really want to reach out to my colleagues and say there's a lot of money in the state. This state is flush with cash right now. I know people take issue when I use the word flush, but it really is. And our local representatives, whether it be Cristina Garcia, Senator Bob Archuleta, that's our entryway to trying to pull some of this money. As a team, we really need to form a plan and approach them, especially with water needs, especially with our water infrastructure. I mean, look at Senator Archuleta. He pulled $1 million for our swimming pool, right? So there's money, but we just need to stay on top of them. We need to formulate a plan. We need to ask our staff, what is the list? Like, for example, I'd like an itemized list. It doesn't have to be too detailed, of what's our water infrastructure needs. How much is it for our AMR meters? How much is it to pressurize our water system? How much is it to rehabilitate our wells? And then go to our representatives and ask for money. Because right now they're collecting asks for next year, their next legislative cycle. We need to ask. If we don't ask, we won't get anything, right? It's just like all those residents that email us and call us and whatnot, the thumping on the road and whatnot, that it gets somewhere, right? So we need to do the same thing with our legislative leaders. I just want to thank you.
No more questions?
Thank you, Mayor. So at this time, we can recess and come back to council.
Okay, recess. Okay. 6 o'clock.
Thank you.